Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another Friday Cisilion live session. So today I'm joined, as usual, by Iqbal, our head of modern workplace. He's no stranger to these sessions now. And I'm also joined by our guest friend and partner manager, Eoin, who looks after us from a Microsoft perspective in everything we do as a partner. So welcome to the session today, Eoin. Today's focus, as I say, is all around Microsoft and what's happened this week at their Inspire event. Now, it's a weird thing to talk about, actually, because Inspire is Microsoft's global partner event, which they run every year, usually out of Las Vegas. So there's usually lots of us right now coming back on a plane or doing some extracurricular activity, having a look around California and places like that. So obviously the event this year was completely virtual, and actually delivered, I must say, really well. I think, hats off to Microsoft for turning, probably the largest tech event in the world into a online tech event without pretty much any hiccups at all. So I think it was a fantastic session. The purpose really of Inspire is to reflect back on the year that Microsoft have had. Their financial year ends in June, and also to step forward their priorities, their investment areas, and what they've seen over the past year and how that's going to manifest itself into the future. So we're going to spend a bit of time talking about those priorities today, and in particular, kind of what mean for you as our customer. We're then going to talk a little bit about the new world. So the world we're now in, this latter half of 2020 is definitely not what we thought it would be when we started the year. The decade usually starts full of optimism and hope and everything, but it's been a real struggle. We've had global public health issues, racial injustice around the world, and of course now economic disaster. So what does that new world look like, and how are Microsoft priorities and changes going to help us get back to a life of normal? And then finally, we're going to touch on I think some of our favourites, I guess, key announcements and investments that Microsoft announced, and again what we can do to help you as our customer address those things. So starting off then, so as I said, the focus for many of us at the event was, of course, around the evolving need of the partner within the Microsoft community, and of course how we help you as our customers. And of course, one of the things that's been paramount really is as cloud technology becomes more pervasive, and as the world moves to a much more consumption-based model, the need and the role of us as partners in how we support you as our customers is changing. And Owen, if you don't mind, I'd like to hand the first question, if you like, over to you, as to kind of where you see the importance and the changing role of partners from a Microsoft perspective.
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. So the way we view partners is they're very much central to our strategy. We are a partner-led company, and every opportunity or customer we work with, there needs to be a partner attached to that. If we look at the stats of last year of the customers we would have worked with, the projects, 95% had a partner front and center in that. And that's whether the partner leading the project and helping the customer achieve the objectives they want, or the partner partnering with Microsoft to drive those mutual outcomes. So for us, Inspire is a key event because we're a partner-led organization. We usually invite about 10,000 partners, or 10,000 partners attend in person to our event, along with about 10,000 Microsoft employees, which is about 10% of our overall headcount worldwide. So it shows the investment we make into partners every year. And this year, I haven't quite seen the stats, but I've no doubt that we've blown those sort of figures out of the water. And the purpose of Inspire is to work closely with the top partners, like the likes of Cisilion, that I work with on a daily or weekly basis to agree on how we're going to help them drive customer success in the UK, is to brief them on what are our priorities for the new year, how can we jointly work with customers to drive the right outcomes, and how we can set out the stall for the next 12 months to ensure that we're addressing the customer needs and trends that we have seen in partnership, in tandem, so we're all in this together. So Rob, does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, it does, and I think just to recap on that, really, we've talked about those focus priorities around remote work, helping achieve business continuity and sustain, I guess, business. Security and cloud migration as being those key things. And I don't know whether you wanted just to touch on any of those in a bit more detail, Owen.
Yeah, so I suppose we're seeing there's many trends you can see. A lot of them are going to be influenced by COVID-19 and everything we're seeing. From what we call a modern work perspective, we're seeing quite a lot around secure remote working. How can people be enabled and set up all of their employees, not just what we call information workers, your typical desk-based employees, but how can we create digital identities for your first line workers as they return to work to drive organizational productivity, but also your workers who are now working from home, who mightn't have worked from home, who initially their work environment was the four walls in the office. Their work environment is now wherever they can access the internet. How are you enabling them with the right tools, the right processes to do their best work and in fact be more productive than they ever were? We're seeing productivity. I know from myself, I know from working with Rob at Iqbal, we can do a lot more in the day because we're not traveling as much and we're collaborating a lot more. But how can you enable your employees to drive that productivity? But the key thing as well is looking at security. Teams has had an unprecedented growth in the last 12 months. But, if I was to look at that on the flip side and some concerns, has that growth been, well governed, and has security and policies driving compliance around that been a consideration as customers begin to implement Teams? And this is very much where I see partners like Cisilion playing a part in this, because Teams caught on like wildfire, but the key is is it secure? Is it well governed? What are your policies? Who are you letting access your data, and how are you managing your teams? Do you have external users in it? These are some considerations that you should be making when you're thinking of your team strategy. And the role of the likes of Cisilion is to help people navigate what can be quite a complicated journey. And there's many ways Cisilion will do that. But I suppose I'll let Iqbal go into the detail of how you bring customers on this journey. But in a nutshell, they're the trends we're very much seeing at the moment, all permeated around COVID-19, how we can help you work from home, but how we can do that in a secure manner as well, while remaining productive.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, and Iqbal, I've got a couple of questions for you in a moment. But just to add to that, I think what we've really seen, and I think what we'll continue to see for the majority of this year and leading into next, is this remote everything. Everything we do is now remote. We've got people that don't plan to return to offices until September. We've got organisations, global organisations, that plan to pretty much adopt a forever working from home approach. Now, of course, that's not relevant for every industry, but we've seen the world of retail completely change overnight. We've seen organisations, Next is a great example of an organisation that had physical stores and was also very much online. They had to close all their operations because nothing they did they felt was safe within a COVID world. And of course, they kind of re-innovated and reopened their organisations in this kind of COVID safe world. But we've seen massive shifts to the way that everything is now delivered. Every organisation that didn't have an online store now has an online store. And some of these transformations have happened in such a rapid pace. We've seen projects, whether that's Teams or data center migrations or VDI or whatever it might be. We've seen customers that have been taking a project that was originally planned for maybe 12, 18 months and doing these things in literally a matter of weeks or months. And yes, all right, there might have been some corners cut and some things done a little bit quickly to get things moving, but it's just demonstrated this pace of innovation and need. And I think the one thing I kind of took from this, and I think probably the reason that we've all been so busy, is if moving to cloud was a good idea for an organisation before COVID-19, it's an even better idea now. And I think if we apply that to a couple of areas of certainly where you and your team, Iqbal, have been working, I'm sure you've got some great anecdotes to share.
No, absolutely. First of all, it's a pleasure to have Eoin on board, speaking with us about what we've learned from Inspire. But I think as being part of that Microsoft partner ecosystem, I don't think there's been a better time than now. We as a partner get better support than we ever have from the likes of Microsoft, and that's benefiting our customers. Our customers are seeing that either through funding or through the technical expertise that we can offer. I think both ourselves and Microsoft pull together, we can genuinely deliver a customer success, as Owen mentioned. Just a couple of key things that I've learned over the last couple of days at Inspire. There was a stat around Gartner have been doing some analysis recently. They interviewed 1,000 CEOs across global enterprises, and the question was asked, post COVID, how many people do they see working from home? And 75% of the CEOs said that they will now see 75% of their employees working from home moving forward. So that in itself tells you where we are now, post-COVID. And I think one of the terms that we're starting to see across many vendors is this hybrid working approach. So the concept of working from home or working from the office is pretty much gone now. It's really developing this hybrid working model, and that's certainly what we're seeing. Since the pandemic, we've seen 89% of the workforce move to remote working. So that's a stat that Microsoft published during the insight, and what they're seeing is that organizations have two key goals. One is to kind of reduce spend and to be leaner, and that's certainly what we're seeing as a partner. We're seeing that across the board, but there's that pivot to the cloud, as Rob mentioned. Now is a better time than ever, and when you start to drill down the stats around Teams specifically, you really start to see that come to life. We've all heard about the 75 billion active users daily, the 200 million meeting participants in a single day, the 4.1 billion Teams meeting minutes generated tells you already the amount of consumption that Microsoft are seeing in that space, and that's again very much in line with what we've been doing, helping customers to gain the benefits of what they can by delivering Teams properly. And what we say when we say properly is to ensure that the due diligence, the governance is all in place to be able to implement that properly. And just kind of moving on from what Microsoft see as a focus when it comes to Microsoft Teams in the next year is calling and meetings, and I'm sure, Owen, if perhaps you can touch on what you see the priorities for Microsoft. I know we spoke recently about what you see as a priority, and certainly that's in line with what we're doing today as well. So yeah, it'll be good to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're looking at a lot in the moment is how we can use Teams as more than just a place where you can call someone or IM someone or collaborate on a project. It's the extensibility of the platform is where it drives the most value. I can't quite remember the stats, but there's a lot of talk around how much time people spend in Teams, but actually the amount of time it takes to move from Teams to a different application. So a lot of the opportunity for a customer in leveraging a platform like Teams is use it as the homepage for everything you do. How can you access your HR application in Teams using the likes of Power Apps? How can you bring your sales pipeline in there using Power BI and visualizations? And how can you make Teams as the hub for how you work? And obviously that permeates quite a lot around remote working, where you don't have the options to do these things in person. But even outside of that, we now look a lot at the return to work scenario. So people are now in the next few months, depending on where you live and where you work and what you do, in some shape or form, you will be returning to the office, whether that's 1 day a week, 5 days a week. That's defined by you and your organization. But you need to have that hybrid environment of you can work from home and work in the office, and having Teams as a central platform to do that, being able to access anything wherever you are, is kind of fundamental to what we're trying to do. And that's very much, you'll see a lot of that coming out from Microsoft in the next while. But for us, the key is how can we make Teams stronger? If you look, I find it very tough to keep up the updates and announcements around Teams, and Rob's blog is probably one of the best places I go to get that information. But every single month, in the last 3 months, we've seen just a flurry of updates, and whether it's 7x7 video calling, whether it's new features and hands-up features. The team are working at breakneck speed to build and implement and keep that platform as up to date as possible. That's not going to slow down. It's probably only going to get quicker. And the key with that is, and the challenge, I suppose, with the customer that is how do you keep up with that? And I suppose I'd ask that question to Rob and Iqbal. With all the updates that Microsoft is bringing out, all the benefits, what can you guys do to customers or help customers make the most of those investments they've made and get the most out of the platform that they have?
Yeah.
Iqbal, do you pick that one up?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right, and I think it's kind of in line with one of the questions that's been asked as well. Appreciate some of the things that we're discussing is quite high level, and there's only so much we can capture in 30 minutes. But we're happy to have a one-to-one with anybody who's joined today to go through the real detail around what we can do to help. And as you say, there's a few things we're going to touch on this in more detail, but we've been doing a lot of workshops with customers to help really kind of assess where they are in their journey with not just Microsoft Teams, but Office 365 or Microsoft 365, and then working out what the art of the possible is based on where they are, to then kind of build a plan that covers off all areas of enablement, for Teams and everything else that surrounds that. So that's one of the key things. The other key area for us, as I mentioned earlier, is many customers have already adopted things like meetings. It's really kind of taking that to the next level. So it's either through devices or being able to manage audio conferencing, enabling video endpoints. We can really kind of help customers take that to the next level. Moving on from that, a priority again for Microsoft and many of the customers now is to look at what we can do around the calling services. How can we start to now enable calling within the Teams platform so that users can start to benefit from using Teams across all modalities, and calling seems to be that last bit of the puzzle. And this is where we can come and help in terms of establishing PSTN connectivity, either via direct routing or Microsoft calling plans. And moving on from that, for any advanced functionalities around call recording or contact centers, we've partnered with the right vendors to help deliver those solutions as well. So for me, we can deliver a full end-to-end service from assessing, discovery to enablement to help you fully adopt those services to then provide a managed service offering that suits the end customer. So there's a whole suite of things there. Just kind of tying back to some of the key announcements again around what's coming, particularly around Teams. Innovation was definitely one of those. As I said, the concept of hybrid work enablement, as Eoin mentioned, Rob's got a blog around some of those enhancements that are now available. But some of the key things like dynamic view and active speakers, the AI is being introduced to enable things like background noise suppression. The together mode sounds quite interesting. I'm keen to see how that's going to work. It looks a little bit strange, but it's designed to provide more of an engaged experience. I think what's been spoken a lot about and what we're all been suffering from is kind of meeting fatigue. We're all on back-to-back meetings, and that can be quite tiresome being on a laptop. So there's new devices coming to help eliminate that fatigue. And obviously, with all of these innovations, we're starting to see more of an engaged experience. And lastly, on the innovation, I think the one thing that interests me is the live captioning and the transcription that's due to come out soon, which again helps to create a way to be able to follow up on meetings, being able to take action because you've got the notes that are being generated through that transcription, all using AI obviously behind the scenes. So I don't know, Rob, if there's anything else you want to add in terms of what that space.
No, I think thank you. I think I'm just conscious of time, and I think a couple of people in the chat window have just asked for us to dig into a couple of the key announcements and things. So I'm just going to kind of, if you don't mind, storm forward on some of those, and feel free to jump in and interrupt me. I think just to finish on the point you made, Iqbal, I think this. The way that Satya defined this was really, the last 4 months has been the largest at-scale experience for remote working that the world's ever seen. And I think that's why we're now seeing this drive of innovation and demand for services around. So I'm just going to touch on, if you don't mind, on a couple of the kind of other key areas. So I'm going to narrow this down through to the kind of a technology stack. So firstly, I'm going to talk about Azure. As I said before, if moving to cloud was a good idea before COVID, it's even better now. Why now Azure? And I think if you look at what people rely on Azure to do, or really any cloud, cloud platform, it's about staying up, their platform staying up and running, to speed to support their critical applications and their services, and for the ability to scale to reach that unprecedented demand. That leads, I think, quite nicely onto Windows Virtual Desktop, which I think has been a bit of an unsung hero in Microsoft's success, particularly around Azure during COVID. Many organisations have been using VDI technology for a long time. Lots of banks, in particular financial services, use VDI for either for everything or for certain application usage. And certainly many of the customers that we've been working with have really struggled. Whether that's been not enough VPN licenses, or simply not enough data center compute, and then the ability not being able to get into their data centers to kind of put more compute in and reorganize things. And of course, that's where cloud works, right? It's elastic. And Microsoft have seen, I read a stat the other day, I think it's something along the lines of 4,000% growth in the demand for Azure VDI. And there was a point I remember right at the beginning of COVID when literally Microsoft were, almost suspended the spinning up of new services, partly because they were all being focused around making sure they could prioritize, critical functions, NHS, those kind of things, but also just because they'd never seen that kind of demand before. So I think, we've seen a massive push for VDI. The second thing that was announced and is new, and if any of you are familiar with Azure Stack, which essentially is how you can take the power of Azure and the flexibility of pure cloud computing, but replicate that on premise. That I think had, to be fair, limited success and probably had quite a limited customer base where that was relevant to. So I think it was very much around remote operations, oil rigs, those kind of things were very much rapid users. Lots of farming and agriculture were quite key users of those things. But what's happened now, and what we've certainly been seeing in the data center space, is that HCI, so hybrid compute, has been the most dominant architecture in the modern data center. And so it's just natural that Microsoft have now released what they call Azure Stack HCI, which went into public preview yesterday, which, as they see, is the kind of the modern way to now manage any data center through the power of Azure. And so if that's something that you're looking at, and there's not really time to go into the detail around this today, if it's something you're interested in, please let us know. But in summary, it's the ability to deliver all the services that you need in an HCI environment through Azure, with that ease of management and monitoring, all through a single platform for your cloud and on-premise environments. So I think, really, really key thing. Azure VDI we touched on. Microsoft have got some quite good funding initiatives available to help customers that are evaluating virtual desktop, particularly if you're using any of their competition at this point. So again, reach out through your Microsoft account team or reach out through us. And if that's something you're interested in doing, then we can probably help you with some funded pilots around those things. The next thing I was going to touch on was security. And I think one of the things that Microsoft pulled out in their announcements actually just yesterday was that 75% of their Office 365 subscribers in the commercial space are now also Microsoft EMS, so Enterprise Built-in Security subscribers. And in fact, it's nearly 60% of those customers now are actually using Microsoft 365 rather than just Office 365. And so that's a really key thing to bring out. And I think, why is that important? And I think a lot of that has come about because many organizations that were not fully cloud or didn't really work around a remote working environment had always felt quite secure and confident in their ability to secure their environment, because they were securing data centers, they were securing the perimeter of their offices and where people were working, and there was probably VPN connectivity for the kind of occasional remote working. And of course, now we're in this world where the workers are relatively comfortable and quite happy working from home, but we've always talked about the boundary shifting. There is no boundary anymore. The boundary and the perimeter of everything is now around identity. And so, it's not surprising to see that there's been a huge uptake in Microsoft Identity protection services through the EMS stack. And again, Microsoft announced a number of new areas that they're investing in to help protect not just your employees, but also your customers. So Microsoft released into public preview as well what they call Azure Identity for B2C. So if you're an organization that's got lots and lots of customers, then all the Azure AD protection services that fit within there will now extend and protect your customers around identity, identity protection, identity theft, phishing and those kind of things. So some quite big announcements there. The final one I wanted to bring up before I hand over to you, Iqbal, was around data. And I think we've been talking about big data as an IT trend for probably a decade or so now. But I think the real common theme that came out of the conversations around data was around two things. So it was around relevance and resilience. And what we meant by that, and what Microsoft really meant by that, was that any business's ability to be resilient and relevant is powered by data. So no matter what industry you work in, you would have seen that trend. We generate so much data every day, not just from our personal lives, but the amount of data that gets created by an organization is just crazy. And actually the problem now is not about how we store data. 10 years ago it was actually about can we keep up with the storage of data and where do we keep it. That's no longer the problem. It's now about how we use that data and what do we do with the data that we've got. How long do we keep it for? Yes, there's data sovereignty and compliance regulations around what data we keep and how we keep it, but it's also about how we generate customer value with the data so that we can improve the services that we provide. You can improve the services that you provide to your customers, and so that you can remain relevant and stay competitive. If we think about the retail experience, people aren't going into stores so much anymore, so therefore how you reach those customers and how you make sure that the emails and the offers and the things that you send them are particularly relevant to them, so you're capturing their hearts and their minds, and they're going to transact quickly. So again, we've seen that in retail, we've seen it in manufacturing. We've seen how organizations like Rolls-Royce have come together to visualize and bring to life products in literally a matter of days, from using technology like HoloLens and Teams to go in and analyze and have a look at how technology is being used, and feedback from the consumers and their test users to see how things are being used to actually kind of speed up and enhance development. And there's obviously loads more examples of those things. So I think if you think about that, and I'm kind of banging on about data, but it's really, really key, is one of the other things that Microsoft spent a lot of time talking about was their development platforms around no-code, low-code platforms. So this is really around the Microsoft Power Platform. So there's been some big announcements around the integration of both Power BI, Flow, or Power Automate as it's now called, into Microsoft Teams. And Teams now is becoming this platform of which everything that you do and you touch comes into. So whether that's around bot integration into other line of business applications, so really simple examples of that might be, if you're trying to book some leave because you've been flat out working like many of us have, rather than going into your HR system and logging into that, then actually you just ask your Teams bot, for you to book a day off, and it will go and liaise with the back end system, and it will pull the data back, and it will, and it will allow you to do those things. Or whether that's just about, taking and manipulating data, and presenting it, very easily into the application state. And Iqbal, I'll leave you kind of to pick up the piece around modern workplace, right? Because that's probably the key thing that most of our users see and feel.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think we've kind of covered off a lot of what's possible with Teams. I'm just conscious of time. So, but just before we wrap up, there's a question that's been asked around, let's see. So somebody works for one of the largest NHS trusts in the UK. So whilst the idea of making apps available via Teams sounds great for our remote workers, how we use many non-standard apps. So I guess the question is, have we as a business, as a partner, as Microsoft partner, worked with other trusts to deliver these non-standard apps via Teams? So the answer to that question is yes. I think the key thing for us is to understand what level of integration we're looking at, what's the use case, what's the objective that we want to try and achieve by the end of this. But, we can use a number of things, Power Apps to try and deliver some form of integration as needed. We can build, iframes to allow for users within Teams to access those applications. We can build chatbots with interactive cards and things like that to really give users the ability to access information within other apps. And I think that's generally the key thing here is whilst users are working within Teams, they need to be able to access information that may reside in other apps. And using a chatbot, for example, can help you access that information at any time. So, I'll encourage you guys to get in touch with us, and we're happy to talk through specific use cases where we can help talk about not just the native integrations, but those that are available outside of that. Again, just as we're about to wrap up, I'm just going to pass back over to Eoin. One of the key things that we are obviously offering in terms of helping our customers, we're running key workshops, funded workshops by Microsoft, focusing on secure remote working, security, compliance, and identity, being the kind of the key focus for us. So, Eoin, do you want to just quickly talk about the value of these workshops for our customers?
Yeah, so these workshops are very much designed with the customer in mind and helping the customer determine what journey is appropriate for them. So that they come in a variety of flavors: secure remote work, Windows Virtual Desktop, Teams meetings and calling, and many more. The idea is that you can work with a partner, and we work with our partners to help them deliver these and actually tailor them based on what, the individuality they can bring to it. But the idea is, as you're beginning your journey, whether it's on Teams, Windows Virtual Desktop, or security, you can explore with the partner what are the possibilities for you, what are the steps you should take, and how and build a roadmap to getting you there successfully. Because part of the challenge is, you get access to some of these services, but you might not have the most cohesive strategy to enable this. Whereas working with a partner like Cisilion on a Microsoft funded engagement, we can help you, or Cisilion can help you through Microsoft, ideate and strategize on how you can leverage these within your organization. So I'd highly encourage you to work with Cisilion around these and begin to explore what this means for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's probably all we've got time for. I think there was a huge number of questions, I think, on these. So thank you for those. Please do get in touch. We will send a summary of this out as part of our rebroadcast of this event, and I think some of the questions that were raised in the chat window we didn't get to answer. We'll endeavour, if you gave us your name when you raised the question, we'll come back to you on those personally. But thank you for joining us. We do hope you found it useful. Sorry we couldn't cover everything that was announced. We will have a blog coming out for this probably early next week, which will cover some of our highlights, what they mean to you, and how we can help you investigate further or enable the technology. So again, thank you for joining. Have a fantastic weekend. Thank you, Iqbal, and thank you, Eoin, for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.